Okay, the next definition is Camlift hinge, and this is a Camlift hinge. Well, let's look at it like this. Here's a Camlift hinge. This happens to be a extremely heavyweight Camlift hinge, which is not unusual for Camlift hinges because they can hang very heavy doors, depending on the STC rating. So the bottom line is a Camlift hinge is a hinge that really I only see in STC openings or sound retardant doors, and I see them in the wild or out in the public when I'm in the Broadway theater district in New York. You're walking down the street and the front door to the theater is here. Well, then there's 2 or 3 pair of hollow metal doors that are, 200 feet down the big brick building side, and it's an emergency exit. But if you ever notice that there'll be some stanchions or fences and people standing around, that's where the cast comes out, and they're generally coming out of those doors. Well, you'll see hinges like this installed on those doors, and you'll know them generally because they do appear to be much larger than standard, but also because they have that odd spiral type cut on the hinge. That's how you'll know that. That's how you'll know it's a Camlift hinge. You'll see that line there. And the question becomes is why would you use these? Well, why you would use it is, again, STC rated openings, or an opening that is either truly STC rated, 48, 51, much higher numbers, or an opening that the client wants to achieve STC control or sound retardant control without it having to bear a label that it's compliant. And we'll look at a typical manufacturer's deployment of not only the hinge but some weather stripping to help with that. And the point of the Camlift hinge in an STC rated opening is it's like a windstorm opening or a specialty door like the Wright door from Adams Wright, and other people who make doors that are, there's second floor above me, it sounded like something was falling off the shelf, assemblies that are only an assembly, an approved assembly, when you're using the door, the frame, the hinges, the lock type, closing, gasketing, threshold, etc. You're only compliant with the requirements of what you need it to be attested or certified to when you've used all of those parts. Now, maybe not this, Z9500 from this manufacturer. It could be someone else's Camlift hinge. It could be a 2-point lock by Sargent or Yale or Corbin or Schlage, but as long as it's a 2-point lock, you're good. Or it could be an assembly where it has to be what the manufacturer tested specifically, choose this or this. So if the STC rating on your opening was tested with this exact hinge, it may require that you need this or maybe a Camlift hinge. Now, why just STC doors? Hard to say. It's really the only time I see them, but we do stock them because they are common enough. And they always have a lead time, and they're really expensive, and people generally don't think of hanging devices soon enough. So a Camlift hinge, the entire principle, and that's why you're here, let's talk about it. If you are enjoying this video, please click thumbs up or like, and also please consider subscribing to our channel. Let's move on to the rest of the video. We're going to talk about it by means of inspecting the hinge. So other than it being a really large barrel, and I could have pulled one off the shelf that was just a standard 5-inch heavyweight, which would be 190 thousandths. This, I believe, is a 1/4 inch thick, so really thick. Be mindful that this isn't going to install on your standard hollow metal door and frame. But that spiral cut there, now if you kind of think about how that might work, what would the hinge do? Well, it would rotate just fine. You have no problem about that. But if we watch it from this sort of perspective, and be mindful that the leaves are flush here or here, you can look at it from either end, and we rotate that hinge leaf, you'll see now that the bottom leaves are no longer flush, nor are the top. So what's happening here is, as the door, and it's a left-hand reverse, you're on the exterior, as the door is opened, that hinge leaf actually lifts the door up that 3/16 of an inch. The weight of the door hanging on this hinge leaf, all of the hardware that's attached to it, wants that door to force itself closed. The weight of the hinge leaf itself, they are lift-off hinges generally. That's what I just did. It's a lift-off. 2-knuckle could be a lift-off hinge. So be mindful of that. That makes them handed, by the way. But as I hold the hinge in my hand, if I tip it ever so slightly, it will want to close. Well, when you throw 150 pounds on this or 350 pounds on this, that door is absolutely going to want to close because of that spiral cut that's on the hinge barrels. Now, why that's important is because when the door comes to the closed position, all the weight of the door is bringing it down. The intent is that the weight of the door, the way that the hinge is cut on that spiral, forces the door closed and keeps it in the closed position such that it's making, the face of the door is making solid, continuous contact with the gasketing. And the gasketing is always a component on an STC rating. So we can pull up weather stripping manufacturers and they'll show, oh, if you're looking for an STC 52, here's what we supply that's been tested and found in accordance with that level of sound attenuation. And the Camlift hinge is part and parcel of that sort of assembly because of the nature of the hinge, that spiral cut, the weight of the door is making it make contact with the face of the gasketing better than a door that would just normally close that's going to be hinge bound. The only thing that's going to keep the door in the closed latched position with making contact with the face of the gasketing would simply be the back side of the latch bolt, because the gasketing is going to want to push the door out and away. Well, the Camlift hinge seeks to counteract the weather stripping wanting to push the door back out. So the weight of the door itself is what's helping seal the door. And a couple of things to think about: they're handed. They're always handed. They, in some instances, will fit in a standard prep. In most, they won't, so the door has to be made for these. This is a 0.25 hinge leaf. This is not going to fit in a standard door prep. They're usually a non-stand. They're usually 5-inch. They're large. I'm not aware of them complicating the installation of any hardware. You might think, oh, well, a door closer, that could be problematic. Well, that question's been asked several times. The amount of movement that you have, and I'll just measure it, the amount of height movement that you have on the door going from 0 to 90 doesn't impact the door closer's ability to actually just function and be attached. The amount of lift that happens here, 0.28 inch, so 9/32 of an inch. So from the top of the leaf here is 9/32 of an inch, so just heavy end 1/4 inch, not a big deal. Hardware is going to work. This isn't a video on this particular brand, but obviously fasteners. Now let's switch to the screen view and let's look at the definition, and let's look at some supporting documentation that would be nice to be aware of when it comes to a Camlift hinge. And I'm going to use Zero as an example only because I have one in my hand, and we'll just stick with that. And their name is actually quite synonymous with STC openings, so you know they're a common go-to, but by no means the only game in town. So let's switch to the screen view. If you've not hit subscribe yet, we would very much appreciate if you did, and hopefully you're enjoying this video. Now let's get back to it. So the definition of Camlift hinge: a hinge designed and manufactured to provide lifting of the door to a specific height as it is opened through a specific degree of opening. Commonly used on sound retardant door, maybe sound attenuation door. The 9/32 of an inch that we measured, that would be the door open to 180 degree. 90 degree would be the place to determine that. So 0.14 inch, you know, you're dealing with 9/64 of an inch is the lift, just heavy on 1/8 of an inch to go from 0 to 90 degree. So a hinge designed and manufactured to provide lifting of a door to a specific height as it is opened through a specific degree of opening. So it would be nice to know what is the reason that it's lifting the door. A second sentence here would be placed right here, might be good, saying the reason for doing so is so that the weight of the door itself and the specialized spiral cut in the hinge barrel provides a positive amount of force from the face of the door to the gasketing material, commonly used on sound retardant doors. So we're going to take a look at an industry standard manufacturer of Camlift hinges, a name that's quite synonymous, although by no means the only people who make them. Actually, Z9500 is the part number that we're looking at, and this is going to allow us to leapfrog into the manufacturer's catalog. So what you see is the image of the hinge, the description of it. Now this Camlift hinge is for doors up to 900 pounds. There are STC assemblies that are likely in the upper 50s and above that are extreme specialty doors that very likely leave the realm of hollow metal doors and frames in ways that we don't get exposed to. For us, supplying an STC door is a mechanical closet in a retail space, not something that is going to be specified by a branch of the military for a particular application. There are specialty manufacturers who deal in STC ratings for those installations, but for us, dealing with the Steel Door Institute and not specialty application manufacturers, we're going to focus on these resources. So a 1/4 inch leaf is awfully thick, obviously. So product brochure, let's take a look at that. And this is going to show you information about the hinge. So Zero has Camlift hinges in your standard 134 thousandths. That's going to be a typical 4.5 regular hinge that you're using in an 18 gauge application, and it's a low STC rating, but it still has to be an STC door. They're going to get into heavyweight, so 180 thousandths. It should be 190 thousandths on a 5-inch. And then this 1/4 inch, and they're showing you the weight range of these different hinges. Okay. So what I want to do is take a look at the manufacturer's product catalog, which is actually underneath this link here, and then we'll pull up their product catalog, and let's take a look at Camlift. And this should bring us to lots of results, but we're going to see an assembly of gasketing. Maybe STC is a better term to search. Yeah. We'll see what a sample assembly looks like. So here's an assembly. What STC2 up to an STC rating of 52 on this STC2, which is here, product code STC2. So if you need to hit STC 52 and you need gasketing for that, and you will, whether the door manufacturer supplies it or you order the door and frame and then you supply the gasketing, this is what you're looking at supplying: a 770, a 367, a 564, a 119W, a 119W, and a Z950. Used in an assembly to control that SDC, meaning this is how they tested it. They tested it with this material. Now, the STC6 product code, to go back to our table, that's a 49. That's an SDC rating of 49. And you'll see here that that's performance is very good. Loud speech, heard faintly but not understood. Okay, that can use a standard Ives 5BB1. That's a regular hinge. Nothing unusual about that. It's not a Camlift hinge is what I'm saying. Pairs of doors for sound control. So the reason that we look at Zero is because they are associated in terms of a name with Sound Control Solutions. Their documentation is well written, published, easy to understand by people within our industry. And the point is proven that that Camlift hinge is used in these applications. Would you want to use it in all applications? Well, I mean, if you're going to attenuate sound, you're sure going to attenuate temperature changes. So it would certainly be beneficial. The weight of the door is literally further compressing or helping ensure a better compression of the gasket. This goes on the jams as well, and you'd probably miter those. But I I've never seen Camlift hinges specified in a door that was not STC rated. So take that for what it's worth. Take a look at a picture of one installed. Yeah, this would be, hopefully this image is large enough to see. That appeared to be an amateur sound studio, or it could be professional for all I know. Kings Hill Records. Yeah, so if this is a recording studio, they're definitely going to have STC rated openings here. And this could be, yeah, this is not garden variety hollow metal. You see this huge lip around here, even though the image is hard to really tell, but that's a Camlift hinge in there. That's not hollow metal. That's a specialty product. Very likely a very high STC rating that's happening there, or higher than we normally get into. Yeah, neat. So they were clearly, what I guess is building a studio and then documenting what they've built. And we get calls from folks, there it is. We get calls from folks all the time. There's your Camlift hinge. It's a specialty hinge. I forget the name of a company that we've bought Camlift hinges for excessively heavy doors, like well north of 1,000 pounds. And maybe the reason people don't use them is because of the cost. Even the standard Camlift hinge, the heavyweight's still extremely expensive. You know, in your standard 134,000s, yeah, I mean, you need 3 or 4 on a door. That's probably why they're not used, I would think. So, the next definition is cased opening frame. Oh, that's fun. There's a lot to talk about there. Let's move on to that. Thank you for watching, and if you've enjoyed this video, please click thumbs up, please subscribe, and maybe even send the video to someone that you know. Thank you.